Okay, try to get through this without sneezing too awful much. And got in bed at 1 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock now. So y'all are going to have to put up with my coffee pauses. I also have the sniffles. So I'll try not to get too awful disgusting on you. But we're going to do a twofer vid here. And when I say twofer, basically I have several people sending me brass this week. And they were asking me what they need to look for. That's basically, brass cases versus aluminum cases or steel cases. If it's light gray, it's going to be aluminum. Those are Padan primed anyway, plus they're aluminum. Chunk them. Steel cases, get rid of them. Take them in for scrap, whichever. So we're going to deal with the brass cases. And again, the reason I was saying the twofers, this is instead of me explaining to everybody what we need to look for in viable cases that they're going to send, no use in sending scrap. And also, since we're starting to do the loading teaching, we'll delve into the what you need to look for as far as case inspection before you start. Again, y'all are going to have to deal with my coffee pauses. So, I don't have a whole lot of selection here. Generally, when I get a bad case, I scrap the case. But I've got a few examples here, and we'll delve into a little bit of case inspection, and especially when you start getting into the rifle cases, what you need to look for. Our big thing on the rifle case is going to be incipient case head separation. That's not something you're going to see right away, like a case mouth split or a crack. Those tend to hide on you. What happens on a case head separation is basically when you fire the cartridge, the back of the case will stay attached to your bolt face, and the front end of the case will stay stuck in your chamber. So not only is it a chambering malfunction that you have to clear, when that case comes apart, it's dumping all that gas into your action, and it can cause severe firearm damage. So that's one thing you really want to watch out for. Also, I will link the Patreon to this. For those of you that don't know, most of y'all know about the tornado storms we had here in Tennessee, and especially where I'm at in Cookeville. Anything that we take in on the Patreon this month and next month, and anything through the PayPal, will go directly to the tornado relief. There were a few deaths in Nashville. I don't remember the exact toll, but just in Cookeville alone, the last toll I had, I think we were up to 18 dead in one small town. So anything we take in is going to go directly to the tornado relief. Hopefully I got enough coffee. So just to jump in here, let's see what we got. Again, I'll apologize for the crappy camera and the focus going in and out. And the reason these case mounts are smashed up is because I've spent 2 days loading nothing but 38s, and these were the bad cases. My scrap bucket's on the other side of the shop, so while I was sitting here, when I run across a bad case, take my little mallet, peen over the end, that way I don't get them mixed in with decent cases. And of course I'm behind the camera, so let me see what's wrong with this one. Basically this one was just corrosion. You see the case is nice and kind of shiny, which would be, indicative of a clean case. But again, apologize for the lighting, but you can see we get the corrosion here and a little bit of brass discoloration. You get that bluish oxide to it. If you can buff it out, whether you clean your cases in a tumbler, hydro clean, whatever, or, for you that just do a few cases here and there and still rely on the old steel wool, the oxidation to the case, which is still going to be corrosion, but if it will come off or buff out, then your case is fine. But when you actually get the corrosion into the case, I'm going to try to get a little better picture here. But as you can see, this is corroding into the case. That weakens the case. That's trash. Now, this is one of the old school 38 cases. And again, I apologize for not having a better camera set up here. But a lot of your old 38s were back when 38 wad cutters, match ammo was still prevalent, and they would crimp the case. Now, the reason the crimps are down here is that's to keep the bullet from setting back in the case. When we get into the loading, we'll get into roll crimps and taper crimps, but the crimp at the case mouth on a revolver is to keep the bullet from sliding forward under recoil and locking up the cylinder. The reason for these crimps is to keep the bullet from setting back into the case. A lot of you are probably not going to run into this with new brass, but a lot of you that are still running old brass, this one, again, let me change my lighting here. See if that helps. Probably not. Okay, a little bit. But a dimple like a candelure is going to be fine, but a lot of these cases have this heavy ring here, and if we can get it up here to focus maybe. And this also has a case split, which we'll get into in a minute. But this ring here is almost like a cut groove. I don't like using these, but if it's not clear through, and especially on straight wall pistol cases, can't see that since I smushed the mouth, but you can actually look inside the case and take a flashlight. I use a flashlight a lot of times for inspection, even whether it's low light or not, because that will actually give me a better view of minor imperfections that won't be seen under normal lighting. But you can look down in the case, and if you can see the ring on the inside of the case, then that's going to be a weakened case. Toss it. Again, coffee pauses. The biggest things we're going to be looking for on general inspection, whether it's sending stuff to me, which I'm going to inspect when I get it anyway, but again, no use in sending stuff and wasting freight for things I'm going to scrap anyway. But your biggest things you're going to look for are going to be case mouth splits, sidewall splits, any kinds of cracks. Generally, on a straight wall case, where it's pistol case, rifle case, 38, 357, 44, 45, whatever pistols, even in rifles, your straight wall cases, your 45-70s, 444s, whatever of those types. Most oftentimes, you're going to get a case failure in the case mouth. You'll get a crack. And what that is generally from is, let me get let's just use the 45 here. So auto loaders are going to get taper crimped instead of roll crimped, but you're still going to flare the case mouth, bell it to accept the bullet, and then you're going to crimp it down. On a revolver, you're going to be roll crimping this over. So every time you roll crimp that over and then fire it and then size it and then bell it to expand it out, all your work area is going to be in this area right here. And brass work hardens. That's where a lot of people get into the annealing debate. I'm not going to touch on that here. That's a complete other video about whether to anneal or not anneal. But the working of the brass back and forth, flaring it out, squeezing it in, flaring it out, that's going to work harden the brass. It's going to make it hard. It's going to make it brittle. That's where you get your case mouth splits. Let me see if I've got an example of a case mouth split. Probably not. Not handy, so. But you'll get the picture. So basically, case mouth split, you're going to see. Again, I'm trying to be behind the camera and in front at the same time. But you'll get a split or a crack somewhere along the sidewall. That happens in lots fired overworked cases. Also, back to when you're belling the case mouth, generally lead pistol bullets, you want to bell a little bit more. That way when you go to seat the bullet, it keeps from shaving the lead off the sides of the bullet. But you only want to bell the case mouth just enough to start the bullet. You don't want to over flare it. It's a mistake a lot of people make. Flare it just enough to get the bullet to start seating. That will alleviate a lot of work hardening and wear and tear on the cases. If you're shooting light target loads, don't have to put a really, really heavy roll crimp on. If it's a light bullet, the roll crimp is just to keep the bullet from coming out of the case mouth under recoil. Now, tubular magazines, 30-30s, such things like that, anytime you're stacking bullets end to end, stacking shells end to end, you're going to have a good heavy roll crimp, basically to keep, let's see if I can illustrate this. As you're stacked in, when you fire a round, when that rifle recoils, this round is going to go against the bullet on that round. Also why you don't use Spitzers or pointed bullets in a tubular magazine. But this round is going to go back against that round, which is going to go back against the next round, and it's going to tend to push these bullets down into the case. That's the reason you have a heavy roll crimp on such things as 30-30s. Is to keep the bullet from setting back into the case itself. But on revolvers, if you're shooting light target loads, wad cutters, even semi-wad cutters, whatever, if it's a low-powered load, you don't really have to roll crimp that case mouth all the way into the bullet. Just enough roll crimp to keep it from setting out. So the lighter the crimp, the better. You want enough crimp to keep it from moving, but you also don't want to roll it completely over, flare it out, roll it completely over. The more you roll it in, the more you flare it out. Again, it's just work hardening. Occasionally, in a straight wall case, and for some weird reason, I've been seeing this a lot here lately, but you will actually get a split in the sidewall of the case. That's the reason I took the hammer to this one. Case split. That's just from being older brass. Probably had some hot loads put through it. Eventually that case is going to weaken. None of these cases here are from things that I have loaded. This has all been in brass that I've gotten in. So I would never let it get to this point. But again, when you start getting any kind of corrosion, that will also lead to a case split or failure from corrosion on the case, which weakens the case. So junk that. Again, I didn't dig too far into my stuff to see a whole lot of examples, but here we can see the corrosion. This blue is going to be oxidation on brass. The reason it's blue is because brass has copper in it. The copper oxidizes just like a copper pipe. Biggest corrosion attributor is going to be moisture, wet, range brass. A lot of people like to pick up range brass. That's fine. But if the brass has been laying on the range for a week, 2 weeks, 6 months, a year, whatever, weather's going to get to it. It's going to get damp. And that's also the reason you get these dark cases. Even if there's no corrosion on them, your case is going to tarnish and turn this dark color because of moisture. So, let's see what I got in 223s here. I'll use the 223s for another example because I've got lots and lots of people wanting 223s. Everybody's got ARs now. And one of the things I want to show as far as ARs, which is fine if you got your general, mil-spec AR-15, most people buy, cheap 5.56 military ammo, shoot them and forget them. They don't worry about a gun being overgassed. They don't worry about scratches and dents and dings in the brass. Most people don't even pick up the brass. If you're an AR shooter and you're going to start loading, one of the biggest things I see, and especially in like your, won't say cheap, but your lower end ARs, the Smith & Wesson MP15s are notorious for this. They're overgassed because everybody's got the carbines. They got the carbine length gas tube, and carbines tend to be overgassed. One of the clear signs of overgassing, and if you have a A2 configuration, i.e. has the brass deflector on the side of the receiver, this dent here, as you can see, it's a straight line dent going straight across. This is from the gun being overgassed, and when it goes to eject the brass, when it comes out of the chamber, comes out, and when it clears, the case comes back, and the brass deflector, as you know with the little triangle shape, this hits the brass deflector, and it has enough force that the brass deflector puts an indent in the case. And now I have stink bugs going down the back of my neck. Excuse me just a minute. Apologize again. But does this weaken the brass? Yes. Is it to the point that this is an unserviceable case? Not exactly. Big thing is if you have an AR and you're getting a straight line dent, my recommendation is, if you're going to load, if you're going to save the brass, change the gas block. The port in the barrel is going to be whatever size it is. I'm guessing a general, what is it, 750. But you can put a aftermarket gas block on with a smaller porthole that's going to keep the gas from bleeding back in quite so much. So if you're going to load, if you're going to fire an AR, if you're getting these types of dents, change your gas block. It's the cheapest, easiest way to do it. It's not that hard. Put a new gas block on, got the gas flow down, going back into the receiver. 1, the gun's going to shoot better. 2, you're going to save your cases. Now, as far as dents and dings, anything that is a straight line dent, a straight line is going to be more of a case weaken. A dent is generally going to blow out. The straight line, because it's a straight line, more like a cut, that leads to a fracture sooner. Generally, when I get these cases in, since we do a lot of target practicing and we're loading up to 223 spec, we're not trying to run full house 5.56 military loads. We get a fairly decent serviceable case life out of this brass. And when I say fairly decent serviceable, that's going to be 3-5 loadings maybe. 223 brass out of ARs is notorious for low case life count. It's because generally a mil-spec chamber is an oversized chamber. Again, that goes to blowing out, squeezing in. Every time you blow that case out, that works the metal. Every time you resize it, squeeze it back down, that works the metal, causes case hardening. But a general case life on a general mil-spec chamber, full length sizing the case back down, you're probably only going to get between 3 and 5 loadings per case. Then it's time to trash the case. While we're on 223, the biggest thing that you're going to see as far as pristine brass, in other words, no dents and dings in the side, biggest thing you're going to see in case failure is not going to be a case mouth split. These generally tend to split at the shoulder junction. You'll get a split right here. Now, if you fire this case, if you have no splits, no cracks, and you fire this case, and you do have a case failure, you're going to get gas leakage. That's going to be hot powder gases, hot burn is going to leak into your action. But because this is generally at the shoulder, it's going to be in the chamber mouth, in the chamber area. Is it good for the gun? Not really. Mil-spec ARs, any basic AR, is it going to hurt it? Not really. Not unless you just do it repeatedly, because those are designed for that. If you're shooting a bolt gun, you're going to see a little bit of erosion. But every once in a while or something like that on a mil-spec chamber, it's really not going to be that big of an issue. And when it does, junk that case. Now, the other things that we're going to get on the 223 cases is on the neck, right through here, you'll get a split or a crack. Now, let's see if I've got an example here. This also goes back to cheaper guns, mil-spec chamberings, and maybe we can see this. Not a very good example, but you're going to get a little indent line right here. All these cases I have in, these were all fired through the same gun. All of them have the same issue. Maybe if I can get turns where we can see here. Yeah, here's a good example. But you're going to get a line right here, a dig in. Again, sorry for the camera quality. Let me find that. I'm also, again, behind the camera. Well, crap. Let me just lay these down and maybe we can see here. You can see this line. Again, a dent in the shoulder. If it's a dent, a round dent, oblong dent, whatever, a roundish dent, those dents are pretty much going to blow back out and really not weaken the case. Anything that's a straight line is going to act like a cut. That will eventually cause a split. Is this a serviceable case? Yeah, for the next load. I'll probably trash this after the next load, even though this is a once fired. And yeah, I know I can get another loading out before that case splits, but probably I'm going to junk that case after the next firing to keep it from splitting anymore, or actually splitting. So again, those are just some things to look at. T43s, let's get into our incipient case head separations. Let me see if I can get around the camera here. I got tons of T43s down here. And these will probably give a fairly better example of what to look for. I don't have any, I think. Maybe I've got some I've already sized. This gets into your full length sizing, and especially if you're doing small base sizing. Generally, everybody says you have to have a small base sizer die for automatics. Yes and no. I've found most automatics, and I will say most, not all, generally a full length sizing is sufficient. Some guns, you need the small base size. Now, what that entails is, as you can see here, when you size this case in a full-length sizer die, you can see where the sizing stops at. This is where the die stops sizing as the bullet goes up. Excuse me once again. Stink bugs down the back of the shirt. In case y'all haven't figured it out, I really, really hate stink bugs. Especially here, we're having a bad problem with them. Ooh, took the sweatshirt off. 45's on the side. It's cold. So anyway, a full-length sizer is going to size down, and we call it full length, even though it doesn't go the actual full length of the case. But it's going to size down to this point here. That's considered a full-length size. A small base sizer die actually sizes the base smaller. Again, 243s, just using that for an example, are notorious for incipient case head separations. Now there is a difference in an impending case head separation versus your size line. This bright ring here, what most people look for on an incipient case head separation is a bright ring. Well, if you can see, this bright ring goes all the way around. That's because in your 308 family cases, which a 243 is simply a 308 neck down to a 24 caliber bullet, still a 308 case. The heads on these, again, get my pointer behind the camera. The head starts right here. So from here up is basically your thin wall. This is your open portion of the case. From here down, this is solid. If you ever see a cutaway portion of a rifle cartridge, you will notice when they do the cutaway, I used to have one, but I don't now, and I'm not going to find my saw to cut one open. But when you cut this away, you'll see this is solid material. This is actually where the internal open portion of your case starts. So this is your head. But eventually you will get a case head separation between this portion and this portion. And that is because full length sizing squeezes down, but you can't size this part down because this is solid. So this is where the thin wall stops. So that's where all your work hardening comes in. Now, again, this is where it takes a little bit of practice. But you will notice when you start getting a line, this is a slight bulge, but if you start getting an actual line across here, it's time to chunk that case. Otherwise, where I was talking about when you do actually have a case separation, I've only had one case head separation, and it was not a round that I loaded, but this was back when I was a teenager, shot a deer. This was in my Model 700 Remington 243 ADL. And I dropped the doe at 400 yards. When I pulled the trigger, I heard it. Deer went down, but when I went to open the bolt, I got this much of the case out and this much of the case. Fortunately, the brass did what it was supposed to, flared out, sealed, and shrunk down. So I simply turned the gun up, and the case ended up falling out of the chamber. It wasn't something I had to actually clear. But this part came out separate from this part. Let's see if I can get a little good picture here now. Again, don't know if we can see this or not. But if you can see here, this is simply where the sizing line quits. This one has a slight bulge. Again, I know you can't see it on this camera. They both kind of look the same, but there is actually a slight bulge right here. And that's because the full-length sizer die that I'm having to use on these is squeezing this down more. So this part's staying full out while this is getting squeezed down right on that head edge, and it's going to cause a lip. So that is something you really, really want to watch out for in your bottleneck rifle cartridges, because 22, 250, 243, 308, all those have a good large head before you actually get to the case walls. You stink bugs are going to make me break out the 45 in a minute. So, back to general inspection. Again, most of your autos, 380, 9mm, 45, that stuff, you're not going to have to worry about case mouth splits. Revolver cartridges, 38, 357, 44, those, especially 357s, those are higher pressure rounds. Most of the time when you end up having to trash the cases on those, it's going to be because of a case mouth split. Your autos, they get taper crimped instead of roll crimped because your auto head spaces on the case mouth. I guess I can show this while I've got the 45 on me hip here. And for the newbies, I know most of y'all already know this, but I just have to throw this out there for the noobs. Your revolver cartridge head spaces on the rim. So you have your rim, goes into the cylinder. This is what stops the bullet from going forward. On the automatic, and yes, I have zombie loads in here, so don't laugh at me. It's what I had. But the case mouth rests against the front of the chamber. And as you can see, I can stick my thumb up there, thumbnail, and you can hear it. But rimless cartridges, headspace on the case mouth. That's the reason you can't put a roll crimp. If you roll crimp an automatic, because there's no lip here for the case mouth itself, that's going to allow this round to go too far into the chamber. So again, most of your revolver cartridges are going to be case mouth splits. I always tell everybody that's loading for pistol ammo, you're going to lose the case before it ever gets to the point that it's trashed. 999 out of 1,000 times, you're going to lose that case before it ever gets unserviceable. So, again, I got in bed at 1, I started at 5, so trying to see what more examples I got here. Primer pockets. Tell you another thing. This is a dummy round. Is the reason there's no primer in it is because when we're loading, if we're changing between bullets, every time you go to a different bullet, whether it's a flat nose to a round nose or even different grades and different types, you're going to have to adjust your seating depth, which to adjust the seating depth means, if I can show this. Stink bug attack. You're going to adjust your seating depth. Now, on 99.9% of your dies, to get the crimp, the farther you screw this die body down, the more it crimps, whether it's taper crimp or roll crimp. To seat the bullet, you want to get your seating depth, you want to back your die body out and then adjust your seater die down till you get the proper seating depth. Now it's ladybugs. But if you have your crimp die set or your die body to set to crimp, you're going to get a crimp if you run it all the way up before you get this seater set. So what we do, if we load a lot of different bullets, in particular rounds, we will make a dummy cartridge. What that allows us to do is, without having to change the die body crimp, we will simply have a dummy cartridge which is loaded to the correct depth. We put this in, run it up into the die, run the cedar die down, or excuse me, the cedar stem down to where it touches, and it's basically just a guide. I know, off subject. But anyhow, back to primer pockets. What you want to look for in your primer pockets. Loose primer pockets are going to be one of your worst things, especially in your auto-loading pistols. And of course, when you get into military cases and crimp cases, you got to cut the crimp out and all that stuff. But as far as the primer pocket itself, let's see if I can get behind the camera again. You want to make sure that you have basically just a good round primer pocket. Any oblong shape, that's going to be a sign to junk the case. Flash holes, make sure you have a good uniform flash hole, but basically you just want to make sure this is an oblong. And if you start loading, if a primer goes in way too easy, again, sorry, I'm getting inundated with bugs. That's a sign that your primer pocket is worn, oversized, and too loose. What happens if you seat your primer in a oversized primer pocket? You're going to get gas leakage between the primer pocket of the brass and the primer itself. That's going to blow back on your breech face. You'll get a black ring around your primer when you fire it. But that is allowing gas to get out of the case and against your breech, and it can cause premature breech face wear, bolt face wear, whatever type of gun you shoot. But it will cause wear on your breech. So if you're priming and your primer goes in really easy, you probably need to chunk that one. For those of you that are just inspecting brass to send to me, I'll deal with that when I get here. But if you have a not circular shaped primer pocket, if you have an elongated primer pocket, or any obvious signs around the primer pocket, go ahead and chunk that case. Mostly what we're looking at on the case inspection is, again, going to be cracks in the case, splits in the sidewall, cracks in the case mouth, cracks in the shoulders if it's a bottleneck cartridge. Anytime you start getting a crack, junk it. Again, on the corrosion, well, let's just show this for example, since, well, I thought I had a piece of steel wool. Yeah, here we go. Just to illustrate, if you have case corrosion, again, if you have any kind of corrosion, when you go to clean your case, if it buffs out, once you buff it out, if you don't have any visible signs on the case, then your case is fine. If you buff it out, let's try the old 30-30 here. If you buff out the oxidation, corrosion, whatever, and you can still see in the brass, then it's time to junk that brass, because that's going to weaken the case. So, I guess there's a quick one-off or twofer Again, I will put the info in the description. Again, any questions, anything I left out, anything we have questions on, stick it in the comments. I will check it, and we'll go from there.